Welcome to the Leadership Lovers Podcast. I'm your host, Will Gladhart, CMO at the Culture Think Tank. At the Culture Think Tank, we empower leaders with metrics that strengthen culture, drive performance, and return. We're here today to learn about the actions leaders have taken to address organizational change. Today, our guest is Jim Tolbert, CEO of Adelante Education Group and Managing Director at the Performance Leadership Learning Lab, or PL3. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
It's my pleasure, Will.
Yeah, let's begin by having you share with our audience a bit about yourself, your background, and the organizations that you lead.
Sure, my pleasure. I started my career actually in investment banking. I worked with Morgan Stanley in the mergers and acquisitions department. I then got my MBA at the University of Chicago and had the privilege of working for McKinsey and Company in their Chicago office for several years. I left and started my career as an entrepreneur at that point. I set up a company that provided funding for students that were attending trade schools, and this also began a very long career in the business of education. And I call it the business of education because it was very much not traditional academics. It was through that I first became the CFO of a private equity-backed education company, and then after that became the CEO of an education platform that I started and also had private equity backing. Today, I'm working on several projects. One is I'm partnered with a university in Mexico, Universidad Santander, to help them expand into the United States to serve the non-English speaking Latino population in the United States. And I am thrilled to be the managing director of PL3.
Well, I'm glad you don't have that much on your plate these days. So we'll be discussing 3 questions today. As a warm up to our conversation, would you share why you believe a healthy culture is critical?
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke with you at one other time, Will, and I really made this an important point. You can't be everywhere at the same time. You can't look at what people do when they're in their office and the door is closed. And so to me, culture is one of the best ways of creating a value system for an organization. People don't like to be micromanaged, and I understand that. So by setting a very strong tone of culture, it gives you the comfort level that to the extent that it does permeate the organization, people are going to make the right decisions.
Yeah, well, we often hear from leaders that you have a culture whether you intended to or not, and many of those actions around culture are driven by the behavior of the leader and how people feel comfortable and connected in the organization and understand their roles. So, Jim, it's been our experience that leaders tend to struggle in 3 key areas: people, process, or profit. In your role as CEO in multiple organizations, would you identify which one of these areas represented a cultural challenge or a general challenge within an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I guess people would be the biggest challenge, and particularly in an industry like I was in education, where it was a very asset-light business, and it was a very much of a people business. And there's a lot of other industries that have a similar high labor content to the product they deliver, pretty much any service organization, hospitality, travel, what have you. It's, to me, finding the right people, it's attracting the right people, and it's also being able to retain them. And this is going to become increasingly important. The United States, and frankly, most of the Western world, is dealing with this demographic time bomb where the aging of the population is creating a situation where we're going to continue to have workforce shortages. And if any organization wants to attract the right people and keep them, that people part of the equation is absolutely critical.
Yes. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. And I know that in our other conversations, you've expressed that in the private equity as well as the finance-backed marketplaces or business places, that people component is a huge challenge, especially amongst the leadership ranks. How do you retain, train, identify the performance gaps, et cetera? So can you identify one of the challenges in one of the organizations that you worked in, and how did it negatively impact the organization?
Yeah, I'll tell you something I've actually spoken often about is particularly for a fast-growing company, is making sure that your team can grow with the company. And frankly, sometimes they can't and they're able to, and sometimes they're not able to. And what's good, what's a strong management team at one level of revenue may or may not be the right team at the higher level of revenue. So to me, the two big challenges we faced was growing the team as the company grew, or frankly, just being able to understand this person can't get to the next level and being able to move on at that point. And, I had incredible people at all sizes of my organization. And sometimes you had to move on from people who were not able to grow with the organization.
Yeah, well, I that's also I appreciate you address that because that's also a unique trait for a leader to be able to identify those individuals who can move forward with the organization in a high growth setting and those that maybe need to find a different role at a different place. What was the one thing, Jim, that you identified that helped impact culture or performance or that people element positively that you did across the board?
Yeah, one of the things, and frankly, I enjoy this the most about my job is I got to be the politician. I got to be the cheerleader. We had a distributed organization. We had locations throughout 3 states, and I made sure that multiple times during the year, I was at each of our campuses. I had a campaign speech. I used to call it, I'm out there shaking hands and kissing babies, but they got to hear from the leader of the organization what was important. And I tried to be as transparent as I could when I went out to the various campuses. It was usually around a lunch type meeting. And I think for a leader to be visible is really very important. And I think most organizations want to hear it directly from the leader, what's important and how we're doing.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. We have seen statistically, analytically, data wise, across the board in our assessments, when the leader communicates effectively and directively to the organization and next steps, we see increases in performance. We see a drop in anxiety. We see better retention across the board. So you're pointing out something that's absolutely critical to be able to measure that, but also think about how the actions of the leader are affecting the entire organization. So, Jim, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up today for any other fellow leaders?
No, the only thing I'd like to add is what I'm doing now with PL3, and I'm very excited to be part of this organization. We have two incredible partners that we have pulled together with the Culture Think Tank, and we're addressing a very fundamental business challenge, particularly in private equity-backed companies, where having the right leadership team is critical. And I think it is not uncommon for private equity firms to have a very subjective process of evaluation and selection of their leadership team. And I think the one thing that we are doing with our partners in bringing a little bit more analytics to the situation is going to have a huge impact on private equity firms to back and to grow their leadership teams.
Yeah, and you're pointing out something that is a much needed piece of the marketplace where 78% of leaders, especially C-suite leaders within private equity, high performing companies, exit in 2 years because they're either not the right fit or they're not able to grow the company. They're not the right person that understands the growth trajectory. So, Jim, I've enjoyed having you on our Leadership Lovers podcast. Thank you so much for your insights.
It's been absolutely my pleasure. Thank you, Will.
Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Lovers podcast. Find all our Leadership Lovers episodes on the Culture Think Tank website at www.theculturethinktank.com or listen on your favorite streaming platform. We'd love to hear from you about the challenges you have faced as a leader. Tune in weekly as we invite leaders to share their experiences in strengthening culture and performance, one action at a time.